Hi, everybody. I just wanted to give you a quick mini lecture about gender identity, since we didn't really have time to discuss this in class. Um, whoops. So, most people who study this think that gender develops in stages. And so they talk about this first stage where is toddlers. This is about 2, 3 years old. Kids start to learn about and understand gender-related behaviors and understand that they are labeled as one gender or another. So they get this understanding that they are supposed to be in one gender category and some sense of what that means according to what's considered appropriate for a particular gender. Once they get into school around the ages of 5, 6, they start to get really rigid about their gendered beliefs. So they start to say things like, girls don't do that, or this isn't appropriate. Well, they don't say appropriate, but they say, this is not something boys do, or I can't do that because I'm a boy, things like that. So they get these rules in their head about this is appropriate for girls, this is appropriate for boys. And then as they develop some cognitive sophistication, they realize things are not quite so much either or. And around the age of 8, kind of continuing on through childhood, kids loosen up a little bit and understand that gender categories aren't so fixed. So you can have girls doing things that are typically associated with boy behavior, boys doing things that are typically associated with girl behavior. So it gets a little bit less rule-based in later childhood. And then in adolescence, we see increasing pressure for people to behave in ways that are stereotypically appropriate for their gender. So this is known as the gender intensification hypothesis. Girls who don't dress in clothes that are considered appropriate for girls will start to hear about it. They'll start to get hassled about it. Why are you wearing that? You look like a boy. Things like that. Boys who engage in behaviors that are considered feminine will start to get a bunch of heat for it and, ridicule. So there's this intensification process that happens where mostly peers will really pressure kids to act in gender stereotypical ways, but also people who aren't peers. So like a parent who looks at an 8-year-old who is behaving in ways that are not stereotypically gender appropriate might let it slide. But once that kid is 14, 15 years old, if they're still acting in ways that are not considered gender appropriate, then their parents will get involved and say, you need to stop doing this. So you get pressure from kind of all angles to act in gender stereotypical ways. And you can imagine what effect this has on people that don't strongly identify with one gender or another, or don't strongly identify with their gender assignment at birth. This is, now you're in the face of pressure from peers, from society. It can create first confusion, but then a lot of anxiety. So that's sort of the general pattern of stages that kids go through. The development of gender identity, there's different theories about how it develops. There's the constructivist view, and Piaget, was kind of the main constructivist, and then Kohlberg, who was a follower of Piaget, and developed his own theory of gender identity development. They felt like kids are actively searching the environment for cues about sex-appropriate behavior. So once a kid realizes, I'm a boy or I'm a girl, then they become intensely sort of interested in understanding, all right, what are boy behaviors and what are girl behaviors? So they're engaged in an active search to figure this out. And as kids start to realize that whatever gender they are is not likely to change over time, this search for understanding what's gender appropriate behavior becomes more intense. these theories don't take into account any consideration of fluidity of gender identity. It's really more like, all right, once you decide or once you figure out this is what you are, then you're going to try and be that for life. And I think we have a bit more nuanced understanding now of the fluidity of gender identity for many people. Gender schema theory is similar, but a little bit different. Kids form their schemas about gender behavior. So, as we talked about before, you develop schemas for different categories of things, and gender is just one of those categories you develop a schema for. And that you continue to sort of add to that schema about what is gender appropriate behavior as you get older. And that this process of schema building starts really very early. I mean, from birth, kids are treated differently depending on what gender they are believed to be by their parents, by people that they meet. And so you start hearing about gendered behavior right away, and that all goes into the building schema. So much so that by the time kids are 5 years old, they've got a very sort of large gender schema that includes all kinds of stereotypes about what's gender appropriate. And finally, the consequences of gender identity. There's evaluative consequences where kids judge their own sex as better and tend to hang out with same-sex kids. This is really what you see in the kind of early school years. Preschool, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, you see a lot of clustering on the playground of same-sex groups, and a lot of feeling like the other sex is icky. So this is where you get all the cooties and gross and that kind of stuff. There's motivational and informational consequences of gender identity. So again, once kids recognize their gender identity or what other people view them as, they start making big assumptions about similarities with people who have the same gender identity and differences with people who have different gender identities. So a classification scheme that is designed to maximize similarities with one's own group, and to maximize difference with members of the other gender sets in. And finally, there's the active self-initiated view of gender development, where kids become just really involved in learning about their gender and developing a sort of more and more sophisticated schema about this is what it means to be a member of this particular gender. Okay, so that's all I wanted to say about it. There's kind of a progression of understanding about gender, and then there are consequences and actions surrounding gender identity exploration and decisions about what it means to be a member of one's gender. That's it.